Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Dead Space 2 Zealot difficulty, no upgrades, no damage, no items, and no shop. This is Chapter 10, and this is 42 minutes of excruciating agony, interspersed with mercurial spawn patterns and vent tendencies, and some genuine moments of, will I have enough ammunition? So, if you played Dead Space 1, you will understand why this area has such a great atmosphere, because it's harking back to that game and the events that introduced us to Isaac and the Necromorphs. The interesting thing about this particular sequence is that you're safe. You are safe all the way up to a section that's in a maintenance tunnel of sorts, where you get attacked by two brutes. So at this moment in time, we've only fought one of the brutes. My strategy was to dismember a leg or an arm, and then proceed to throw back the explosive ball sacks that they fire at you. And it's nice to see that that's going to be my strategy for this one too. The brutes themselves are a good way of saving ammunition if you do that. And then after that there's going to be a rather large engagement that we're going to be taking on. For the most, there's not that many memorable sequences in this as far as being incredibly difficult. The problem is that there are a lot of long fights in succession, and the long fights are the ones that can take the most off your resources. The first area that started to get really bad for me was before we came back to the decontamination room. So there is a corridor that leads into the 0G puzzle, where you're messing with the pillar. And I decided to skip the enemies because there was a lot of them, and I didn't have a convincing way to kill them all in the manner that I wanted. Because the strategy started off really, really nice. I was using the puker to turn around to kill the lurker, and then there was people coming forwards, and then there was the stalker, and it was all kind of awesome. And then you turn the corner and there's more stuff that turns up. So because I didn't want to waste too much ammunition, I ran past them in thinking that they would despawn, or that they wouldn't be there, or that they'd leave, and they don't. So when I was coming back through, it meant my return journey was really, really tense, because at any moment black slashers could drop out of vents that weren't supposed to be there and would chase me into rooms that I wasn't supposed to have problems with. And it transformed my return journey into something completely different. And it's cool, and it leads to some pretty awesome, tense moments, but by the time I got to the contamination room, which is already a pretty tricky fight, my ammunition wasn't where I wanted it to be, and I was hoping I could get it back up to where I wanted it to be. And in the end, I end up not fighting the second spawn inside the contamination room and using an exploit that is well documented online, where you can kite one of the kids and the next spawn never happens. And the fight itself is not that difficult, but I was really getting to the point where I was worried about what was going to come up. And in the rest of the encounters, most of it went okay, but there's one fight in particular that stands out as being ridiculous. And it's the room with the telekinesis platform that you have to move, that has the black slashes in it and that electric corridor. That room in particular, because of the way that it's spaced, is very difficult. And it's difficult for two reasons, and they're the worst reasons in my opinion. The first one is that the checkpoint is bad. There aren't many instances in this game of what I would class a bad checkpoint, but this is one of them. Because it's two spawns separated by an elevator, and I feel like the lift, even though it's in a room and not instanced, could have easily have been a checkpoint. And then the second reason is because the leapers are random. So, leapers, when they get close to you, are very predictable. They like to do an incredibly quick slash that you can interrupt if you shoot it, but God bless you if you do, because it's really hard to do. They're so fast and so accurate and on you immediately that most players are going to get hit. It's just how they work. They're designed to be these incredibly agile opponents. And we're talking about black leapers too, who are even stronger and even more of a nightmare. And then when you compare that you have to fight, I think it's maybe 3 or 4 of them in rapid succession, in a room that isn't really set up to give you that much power, and it leads to a situation where it's tough. It's really tough. And then the checkpoint compounds it into being quite a problem. But it's not too bad, it's just a whole host of things that make it tricky. And I wish the room was a little bit better kitted out with tools to deal with the lurkers. with the Leapers, sorry, and I kind of wish that the Leapers had a preset position rather than favouring the vent that's closer to you, because you can't really spawn kill them. One of the changes I would love to see for that particular enemy is have it have a meticulous animation for spawning, and then everything after that can be crazy fast. But as it spawns, it should be deliberate enough that you can set it up and hurt it as it arrives, and it would reward players who are knowledgeable and pay attention, and you're able to immediately sever a limb so it's nowhere near as crazy. But for the most, they come out of the vents so quickly sometimes that you don't even have a chance to shoot them correctly because they've already jumped. And the jump is the problem because they can do it at any time. And the times when they do it to go to other walls, like Isaac used to do in the first game in Zero Gravity, and sometimes, like I've seen Leapers do strange things, and it's almost impossible to stop them because for some reason the one attack in the game that you would want to be completely halted by shooting them is that move. And it seems to be one of the only moves in the game that you can't stop. It's like the charge by the Brute. I don't know how you stop the charging Brute. I've hit him with everything, and unless you sever a limb, he will continue the charge. But it makes sense in his case, because he's this huge, lumbering rhinoceros of a monster, right? You wouldn't be able to stop this dude. It makes sense. But a shitty, tiny, like little fetus dog monster that's got half a torso and a big old whippy tail, he should be stopped if you shoot him. And I can understand, like, they want it to be a threat, so they can't have him be too easy. But at the same time, I don't think if you could interrupt him, it'd make him too easy, because I still think he'd be a pain in the ass anyway. Because half the time when people die to lurkers, or sorry, to Leapers, it's because they didn't really see it. They heard it spawn, they panicked, and it was already on top of them. The player that sees the Leaper spawn and engages it is not the same player that dies to it. You might get a hit here or there because they're stupid fast, but you at least knew it was there and you knew it was coming for you. So, in an awareness terms, you shouldn't have been hit by the Leaper, but you were because of just how capable they are and just how difficult it is for you to stop them. And when I was watching a bunch of production diaries for Dead Space, and one of the art director was mentioning how he likes to stasis the Leapers and then move when they're jumping. And stasising them when they're jumping is a valid technique. You can definitely do it. But the amount of times I've tried to do it and I've missed, it's pretty high. And of course that's human error. That's me not being good enough at stopping the Leapers, and it's something that can be learned. But it has to be said, in as far as accuracy and stopping that move, if it misses, you get hit. And it misses more than it hits for me. And there's times when you feel like you're spot on the enemy when you do it, and it still misses. And it leads you to do moments where you try to maybe preempt it or try to lead the stasis. And it oftentimes doesn't end so well. But there's no doubt somebody out there who's a magician at stasising the Leapers and never has a problem with the jump, because there's always that guy. But I can honestly say that that's not me. Every Leaper fight in this game, I've known about it because I just find them to be such a tricky enemy. And I'm happy that they're a tricky enemy, because that's what makes them cool. It's just the jump. The jump attack is something I fundamentally disagree with. But now we have a bunch of the spitters, we have a bunch of black slashers, and then we have a pregnant just chilling out over there. If you don't know, the pregnant releases those crappy foreskin monsters that should be deleted from the game's files because they serve no purpose. Interesting thing as well, I was watching Total Biscuit play Dead Space 3 on one of his quick look videos because he just recently passed away, and I thought, you know, in memory of him and what he tried to do, I'd watch a video or two. And he didn't like stamping on the bodies. He thought that it should be something that's almost done automatically, and he found it to be really tiring and that it got old really quickly. I've played Dead Space since it first came out. I've played each of the games a handful of times. I've put in a decent amount of hours with Dead Space, and I've never got sick of stamping on stuff. I guess maybe it's just different strokes for different folks, right? But I thought that was quite interesting. This moment right here is a intentional scare to try and make you think that there's more happening than there is. It's one of those stingers that gets all paranormal. But for the most, I don't think we're in any trouble now until we get to the next sequence of rooms. So hopefully we can keep our torso on our body and continue onwards. Like moments like this as well, when you're hacking these machines, they like to try and shit you up with the noises. And I figured out what it is, guys, what the noises in Dead Space are. Because in every walkthrough I've done for these games, I've mentioned how dishonest the sound is and how it seems to be way too loud and the sound is thrown in certain situations to often mislead you. Well, the technology in the game is apparently called a fear system, and the fear system is dictated by your position, the enemy's proximity, and if either of you are aware of the other. And depending on what all of those variables depends on how loud and what the sound is like. And I watched a whole bunch of audio production diaries that were talking about designing the sound and adding effects and everything, so it gave me a little bit of an idea of how that system works. And in the third game, it also governs how scared Isaac comes across as. So you'll notice in the third game there's a lot more instances of him breathing heavily and being affected in that way, and that's to do with this fear scale that he's currently under. Depending on how the fights are going and how the interactions are going will depend on how he responds, which is really cool technology. But misleading audio is one of those things that really helps for the casual playthrough but really hurts for the more, difficult and technical playthroughs. So I don't know where you guys stand on it, but I always find it to be an interesting choice, because I use a headset when I play these video games, and it's a good headset, so it gives me a lot of information from it. And when I get information and it's a bluff or it's some kind of red herring, it can be a bit annoying, because audio is so important. It's one of the reasons that I was very critical of the audio telegraphing in God of War, because there's parts of the audio telegraphing in that game that are simply not up to the task of helping you evade. And there seem to be quite a few people who believe that the audio telegraphing is perfectly fine, and I just question what video games those people have played, because they can't be the same ones that I have. And a lot of the telegraphing in that game is okay, but in this game, the telegraphing seems fine, but there's too many instances of false telegraphing. So it's a horror game, and you understand it here, because it's designed to have those stingers. It's designed to have those moments that shit you up. Like, they're almost Deus Ex Machina for this kind of genre, because they're needed to give the person who's looking for that kind of scare, right? Whereas I think jump scares are garbage, personally. I think they're the lowest form of any kind of cerebral horror. In my opinion, it's the psychological stuff and the atmosphere that's way more terrifying. Like, I personally feel that the idea of something is way, way, way scarier than being able to see what that thing is. And because it gives your imagination room to do what it does best, which is to fill it with all kinds of abominations. And speaking of abominations, I just ran through a corridor of them. Watch this, by the way. Look at that! Here's me thinking they won't be able to get in this room. You were wrong, Chris. They can get in this room. And it's going to make it really awkward, because I just didn't think they'd do this. I'm like, really? Are you going to stand there, dude? And he can't come in here, because he's on a pilgrimage or something, and apparently he can't enter into this room. But I'd completely forgotten how this section worked, and it's going to lead to some interesting scenarios coming up. Because I have to get back through that corridor, and now that I've run past it, I've put the enemies into an undesirable state, which means it's going to be pretty much like playing Bulldog when you weren't very good at Bulldog. There's going to be a full squad of people on the playground who are really good at it and out for blood, and you're just going to be like that one girl that gets taken out in slow motion and it looks like something out of a car accident. You're going to be her, and nobody wants to be her. So I have to get quite creative, and once again, I'm very cognizant of my ammunition at this moment. This is about the point of the game where I started wishing I'd been a little bit better with my choices, and it's interesting because there was a part of me that wanted to do this challenge with the trainer on and have unlimited ammunition, but the problem with the trainer is you don't reload, and reloading is a tactical decision and an important micromanagement of these kind of games. I would have no problems with playing with unlimited ammunition thanks to the trainer. Wouldn't bother me at all. I understand that resource management is important to these games as well, but I'm coming here for the action, I'm coming here for the fighting, and if I've done it right, and I've done my job, then I should have the means to defeat the sequence, right? So in my way of looking at it and my logic, using unlimited ammunition to enable me to do every single fight and not worry about running out later on means that I can play to my best ability for the full time. But when it doesn't reload, nah, couldn't do it. And I was thinking about doing a similar thing with God Hard mode, Vanquish. because you can get a trainer in that game to give you unlimited ammunition, and it means you can play the full game with weapons you simply never have that kind of ammo with. So if you wanted to, you could have a rocket launcher the entire time, and of course that wouldn't be much of a challenge run because it's one of the best guns in the game, but you get my idea. Guns like the LFE gun or the shotgun, that you get a decent amount of resupplies, but you can't realistically carry it through the entire game, and there will be instances as if that's the only gun you use, you won't have any ammunition during a fight because there's just not enough ammunition to go around unless you played immaculately. So in those circumstances, instead of, waiting and reloading and getting a run where you got a shotgun drop, which is RNG, you could be guaranteed the ammunition and you could just do it without worrying. But once again, you don't reload. And reloading is important because that's a skill. Managing reloading is one of the most essential parts of any kind of shooter. Because if you reload at a bad spot, you will get killed or take damage. And to completely remove that is not good. And I had a similar problem with another idea that I had with Vanquish. I wanted to do a no upgrade run of hard mode, because I feel like hard mode is way more fun and way more lenient for being a lunatic, which is how I like to play on Vanquish. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to use the cheat engine to limit my amount of AR. So the slow motion bar that you get on normal and hard is about twice as much as it is on God hard. So I wanted to limit it so I could have the limitations of God hard without the insane AI accuracy that just murks you immediately. And unfortunately, no matter what variable I put into that cheat engine to try and limit how much AR suit I had, it always gave me infinite, and that's the complete opposite of what I was going for. So that was unfortunate. But here are a few enemies in a save room which I really disagree with. And I think I disagreed with it on my original walkthrough because the idea that enemies can reach you in a safe room is really silly. There are survival horror tropes that need to be adhered to. If you're a virgin, you're safe. If you're, Jamie Lee Curtis, you're safe. But everybody else is fucked. And the safe room is safe, right? You didn't get generally attacked in the Resident Evil series while in the safe room. And if you did, it was one of those one-off cliche moments. And it was cool. So, yeah, going against the stereotypes, not my favourite thing. But this is where I get myself into a spot of bother. So I'm running away from these fellas, and I'm going to be chased into this room by a black necromorph, who should not be there. And I'm doing my best John Wick impression, with my car stance up against the poster there, looking all beastly. And look at this bastard! Once this room's sealed, I didn't think he could get in it. How wrong I was. And as you notice, black slashers, they take a beating. And that's what makes Dead Space 3 seem like such a slog, because the normal necromorphs are like black slashers in Dead Space 3. Because everybody takes a beating. But here is the decontamination room. You're going to be attacked by the pack, to which I'm going to sell them some DHS carpeting. And once I've got them down to just one left, I'm going to circle this middle section, and I'm going to show you a manipulation of this particular AI, where when you aim at them and you move back and forth, it will bait them into running at you. And when they run at you, they do a claw attack that's quite exaggerated. And if you get them to do it correctly, you can keep him on the other side of this. And if you aim at him, you can oftentimes make him try and dodge and make him follow what you're doing. So if you notice, when I'm moving back and forward, so is he, because he's trying to cut me off. And what this enemy does, guys, is it reads your input. If you start going towards the left, he's going to start going towards the left to follow you. And it's not as punishable as something like a fighting game, but they have a really good knack of knowing where you're going, and they will begin to cut you off the moment you start doing it. And the only time where you're immune to this is when they attack. When they attack, they of course cannot change their pathing to move with you, so they'll just try and track with you, and the tracking is oftentimes not as kind. But all you do, guys, is keep this one dude alive, and then the alarm's going to go off, and the door's going to open, and then you can continue without having to take on some of the black puker and the black slasher and everything. And I don't really like doing this. On my original Zealot run, I did this room. You'll notice on my old walkthrough, this room is completed. Because I don't mind this fight. It's close quartered, but close quartered is kind of where you shine on mouse and keyboard, because you can do some serious damage. But I was so paranoid about my ammunition that I did this. And if you're doing hardcore, this is a really good strategy for avoiding any of the more difficult fighting in this room. But you need to be aware, because I haven't killed those necros behind me, I'm going to have quite the train, and they're all hungry for my blood. So as I exit this room and I go into the next room, it's going to give those necromorphs free reign into this room, and they can follow you. And you have a black puker and a black slasher waiting next to an elevator that takes an eternity to arrive, so you can get pincered by necromorphs if you've played it like I have. So that's somebody coming through a vent. Bad news, bears. This is me trying to run away and hoping he doesn't chase me. In here, there's a puker on his belly because he has no legs. And for some reason, which I don't quite understand, his positioning moves when you restart checkpoint. I don't really know how that works, but the amount of times I came into this room and I was stood on him and he puked at me at point blank range and I had to restart was frustrating. The great addendum to that, though, is that the checkpoint is just after the containment room, so you're in the room after the fight, and you don't really have to do anything. But this is a part where I kind of wish that the puker came in behind the black slasher, because then you could use the puke to just destroy him. But instead, I'm gonna chuck body parts at him for the next 20 minutes as I try to do some damage. There is a limb there, Chris. Pick it up. There you go, and he's dead. But see how much they take. Yeah, those black slashers are no joke. But look at them. Look at them all waiting for me. Tons of them. Chilling out. Crazy. It is interesting, too, that when you aim at the puker, it seems to change how he moves. I think that's quite fascinating. There are a lot of aspects of Dead Space that I've kind of forgotten, and there's a joy to that, because when you relearn something, it's like you're learning it for the first time. And sure, there might be a part of your brain that remembers, some kind of muscle memory, but a lot of the principles of how the game is played, I'm really curious if I even ever knew it. Because it can be easy to think you did when you didn't. Oh, by the way, this guy has the foreskins on him, so don't even mess with this dude. But you can't skip this fight either, because running onto the train is too slow, I think. I think that's the reason why I had to do this. And now we're going to be coming up against the problem of opening doors when you're doing kinesis. There goes him, there's his spike, and there's his buddy. And now I'm probably going to be throwing lights at him to try and stop him. Drop some plasma cutter rounds, thank you kindly. But this might look random to you right here, but there is a skill to it, believe it or not, and the detection can be a bit wonky, as witnessed just then. If you hit them on a limb, it does do decent damage in the grand scheme of no damage. So you still have to chuck it at them 40 times, but you will be able to dismember a limb eventually, and then with it you can try and kill them. But because the detection on hitting them or hitting the limb is quite cumbersome at times, because of how big they are and how close they are and everything, you oftentimes will kill them before you've done enough limb damage to chuck the limb at them, which is a little annoying. That's a spitter, right? No, it's not. I think it's not. I can't tell. Anyway. It's dead. There's no hole in its chest, so I don't think that one can spit. I think it's just a standard slasher. But for some reason, I kind of associate the skin-coloured ones with the spitting ones, even though they do kind of look a bit jaundiced, the ones on Chapter 5. But in the first game, this was one of those sequences where you went to the tram, and the tram took you to the next section, and it was kind of pretty formulaic, wasn't it? It was formulaic, but you were so into the game, you didn't really notice that all you did was go to area, like the Crystal Maze, clear area, go on train, go to next area, clear area, go on train, go to next area, and it was just that for the full game. But because the game was so well presented, you just didn't really notice nor care. And I think that's definitely a large compliment for how good that first game was. Especially if you want atmosphere and you want horror, because I feel like the atmosphere of the first game is so goddamn good, it's untouchable. For me personally, anyway. I know a lot of people like Silent Hill 2, but it's all preference. But the luminescent area, this part right now, as the lurker jumps on the roof and the puker's just in front. I hope the puker can give me something to work with. That would be great. Fire a couple of lunchbox at this guy sprinting at me. There's a cup of bleach. Get on your back, son. On your back. Come on, puker, help me out. Oh, interesting. The puker killed the black guy for me. That was awesome. Which someone's probably going to take out of context. That's a spitter. Go on, love. Give me something to chuck back at you, please. There you go. Interesting, she took it. What a beast. Once again, justifying the dismemberment system. And if you're new to Dead Space and you've just stumbled on this video, shooting the necromorphs in the chest or the face or the gut, generally not a good idea. It will damage them, but it will not damage them as much as if you shot them on the limbs. This game is all about severing limbs, and as gratuitously violent as it is, it's so effective you have to really do it. I imagine somebody's probably done a run where they try not to dismember anything, which would be quite interesting to do, because not only would you have to be really accurate, but you'd also have to waste a ton of ammunition to do it. But this is one of the more famous rooms off the first game. This is the Hunter room. And it's one of those rooms that instills a lot of dread in players who remember it, because this was a tricky section on the first game. Fortunately for us, this is not that hard on Dead Space 2. Of course, this enemy is a problem if he gets too close, but if he gets too close, you've probably done it wrong. And thus you can retry, right? Unless you're on hardcore and then you're cursing your life. But I'm going to chuck a couple of lights at this dude. Not the best way of killing him, it must be said. It'd probably have been easier to stasis him and beat him up, but it's nice to try different things every so often. Throwing lights at some random disabled necromorph man with an explosive for an arm. You know, not the most polite thing to do, but he is trying to kill us, and I feel like given the circumstances, we can be let off. But after you open this door, I believe something eventful is going to happen, and I think that eventful thing is a black puker who's a sniper. So immediately move away from that doorway and then take him out with the explosive. And I think there might be one more exploder or maybe a slasher or something. What was that, guys? I saw something spawn then, and then it wasn't there. I don't understand what just happened. Maybe that's a PC thing when you play this game on a higher frame rate and everything just kind of goes weird. But I have had a few instances on this game where the spawns haven't worked correctly, and that could be another one of them. And traditionally, in a walkthrough, if I get a moment where a spawn hasn't worked correctly, I'll restart to make sure it does, because there's no point in doing a strategy for a sequence when I have some kind of strange extenuating circumstance. But in a run like this, it's been so long since I've played this game, I didn't really know what was intended and what wasn't. There were a few areas, for instance the Ellie sequence where you're surviving in the room that you fought the first brute. I knew that there could be more enemies after the enemies that I was given on my successful run, because I'd had a non-successful run where I had way more enemies. And it's just one of those things. The spawns can be mercurial, is what I will say. I say capricious quite a lot, but that's kind of the same thing, right? But here is Nicole, giving us a little bit of a stream of consciousness. And I installed Dead Space 3 last night. I'm sure you're all gasping. I know I would be. And it has to be said that there's this almost morbid curiosity within me that wants to go back to that game. I really do. And I don't know why, because I know I don't like it. And traditionally, games I don't like, I don't enjoy very much. And it can be very difficult to play, but there's a part of me that wants to prove something. I don't even know what. Going back, you know, with mouse and keyboard, and just kind of wrecking the game, and feeling good about wrecking the game in spite of its incredibly cheap nature. Because one of the things that I really disliked the most about the third game is just how cheap it felt. It felt like they just changed all the rules, and not in a good way. Enemies did nothing but spawn behind you. There were always far too many enemies. The gracefulness of the encounter design just seemed to be thrown to the wind. Your guns felt underpowered all the time until you got guns that were so strong the game was a joke. You know, it was so straight. Everything felt fast. Like, everything was leaper fast for no good reason other than everything's fast now. And I felt like it betrayed all the decency and the principles that the first two games held dear. And I know that this sounds very melodramatic and pompous of me to say, but it's true. Yeah, that's how I felt. This is the room, by the way. This is the really hard room. So the leaper can either spawn in these vents or the vents to your right. Depending on your positioning and the timing will depend on what he does. I'm going to wait for him to land before I lance him with this, because the amount of times I missed him on the wall, even though it technically hit him and it didn't hit him, was a little bit frustrating. And the checkpoint is before you've entered this room. So you have to do a sequence of easy to fuck up sections here. And for the most it's easy. The lurker's not a problem. There's a stasis on the wall there you can refill to. The first leaper's not a problem. But when you go down here, you fight two leapers, and then you remove the battery, and then you get attacked by a leaper, and it's that leaper that's the problem. Because he has a tendency to show up when he wants. And he can show up generally from the same position, but I've had him do two different things each time. And to have to redo everything because you got attacked by a leaper is one of the more frustrating aspects of Dead Space, because they don't ever feel fair. That's why I'm immediately stunning them when they come out of the vents and taking their limbs. Because the moment they start doing things is when shit hits the fan. But I could remember this room, and I remember going towards the doorway in this room, and then a bunch of those foreskin monsters attack you, and I remember it being super cheesy. But it didn't happen, so that might be in the first game. Which is a strange memory to have, but it's a strong one. In this room there is a node and another plasma cutter round, and there's also a plasma cutter round on that bench over there that I picked up. You can get that from the balcony. Because this next fight kept causing me trouble, I failed here about 3 or 4 times, and it was getting a bit frustrating because I got sick of moving this platform and just setting it all up and getting unlucky with the leapers and having to redo, and this was definitely the hardest fight of the chapter for me, just because of the length of it and the fact that if the leaper wants to do what it wants to do, stopping it can be difficult. But once you come down here with full stasis, when you pull the battery out, immediately put it back in because it will kill the slasher that's going to come from the other way, and then you have to kill a single slasher and then one of the leapers. And it's the leaper, as I say repeatedly, who's the problem. You have to spawn that, by the way. If you don't trip that line, it won't work. But turn that back on to cover yourself, kill him, and then pick up the blade that he drops, and then kill the leaper wherever it is. And that time, it was in front of me, it came off the wall, it was fine. I've had times where it's come from the left of me, and it's one of those things where if the leaper wants to mess you up, sometimes you have to take it. And I hate saying stuff like that, but it's kind of true. The amount of times where I've aimed at them and shot them and they've still hit me is off the charts. But pick up the stuff. Make sure that you get everything that you can, because that was a pretty hard-felt room, and I don't really remember this room too much. I remember, of course, that it has leapers in it, and they're a nightmare, but I don't remember ever having too many difficulties here. But the last time I was here, I could have put mines down, I could have used the line gun, I could have used the seeker to wreck things. Like, you have so much equipment. The javelin gun. It's a little bit different when you have an unupgraded plasma cutter. But even then, this gun is so ridiculously good. Oh, by the way, look at this as well! Oh, I hated this room so fucking much after that. That was one of the worst moments of the run right there. Because you do all of that room, you're not even certain if you've got the checkpoint for doing that room, you don't want to do that room again, and then you go into a safe room, assuming it's safe, and you get foreskinned. So bad. And the thing with this creature is, if a few of them get on you, 1 or 2 of them, as long as you press the button, they do no damage. But if enough of them get on you, they do ridiculous damage. It's super crazy. But I was so pissed off, you don't even know. I mean, you know, but you don't know. Trust me on that. And I think that those moments are harkening back to in Resident Evil 4, where Shinji Mikami put the snakes inside of the boxes and the pots, and every so often, when you knifed the resources, you got attacked by a snake. So it conditioned you to do a double attack to stop that from happening. So you could just quickly knife the snake and get a free egg or something. And in Resident Evil 4 it worked because Leon had a very capable melee attack and they didn't grab you. In this game it just doesn't work because Isaac's melee attack is worthless and stupid, and they grab you in a context-sensitive action that can lead to damage. So I've always been really resentful of those moments. They don't fit the game, I don't think. They're pretty cool when you die to them though, and there's the really gruesome animation of you being killed. But then again, this is Dead Space, so every enemy has one of those. One of the biggest attentions to detail in this game is all the creative ways in which Isaac can die. And it's crazy how many ways he can die. There's probably death animations in this game that 99% of the people that play it have never seen, because there's that many of them and they're that diverse. And some of them you have to try to set the circumstances up because they're so unlikely to die, but someone's got to do it right. But save, use your store, sell your items, get some inventory room. Wonder what the hell went on in this room, because I don't remember it being this gory in the first game. It looks like the biggest orgy, the most bohemian, Sodom and Gomorrah inspired decadent party went down, and they decided it to get like Joel Schumacher to direct it after he'd finished ruining the Batman series. But there's no train for us this time, no tram. So we have to move through a 0G area, which is defended by a couple of lurkers. And traditionally, guys, whenever you come into a section like this, because of the nature of the controls, if you're using mouse, I would recommend you skip these moments, just run past them. because it's not fun. And you can see my aim looking like a drunk man, because it's just wobbling everywhere. I'm overshooting and I'm undershooting. It's essentially what Dead Space 3 feels like. You just don't feel like your aim is your own, and you feel incredibly unconfident in your ability to do it. And you see me, I'm flitting around like a madman. It's crazy, but there he is, sneaking up. And I completely forgot too that that enemy in Dead Space 3 is completely different. And its face looks more like the symbol that goes on the hood on Demon Souls when you get Plague. It looks like a Plague Doctor face, which I really don't understand. They have babies that explode and they're worried about giving that creature a child's face. I always felt that that was one of the more interesting designs too, because you know it's meant to be this childlike, cherubic image, and it's been corrupted and changed, and it's an easy thing to empathise and associate with because it's inherently human. It's a pillar and symbol of innocence. It's a child, right? And it's been twisted, and that's where the terror comes from. The fact that it's been warped into some abomination. But giving it a weird beak and turning it into some stupid, like, turtle thing? I wonder why they did that. Do you think they got complaints, maybe? Because admittedly, in this game, you take on enemies that are children, called the Pact, so you're killing kids, and then in the next game they removed them, but brought them back in DLC. So, if there was a backlash to you attacking these childlike creatures, instead they decided to put in starving Ethiopian-like people instead, which is way, way, way better, right? Because there's nothing offensive about stereotyping an impoverished part of the planet, but the children was just too far. But once again, we're taking on the best enemy in the game by throwing a light at them, and this is a pretty dodgy room. Not only do you have a boatload of pukers that like to turn up midway through this fight, but you also have stalkers, and I have a doorway that they don't really seem to understand, which means they cannot get behind me, and I'm in a very strong position here, so I'm going to proceed to kind of take out the stalkers in the most wasteful way you can, but in the grand scheme of things, after skipping a few fights, I felt obligated to do so. As much as I should be throwing bodies at them to knock them down, stealing their hand and then killing them with it, which can be a bit tricky to do, but you can do it. And who knows, maybe they'll drop something good. Because that's one of the strange aspects of this game, the ammunition drops. I will never understand why you get ammunition drops for weapons you haven't even built. I always find that weird. Like, and I understand that there is a system that prioritises the gun you're holding for one of the ammo pools, and then the others are seemingly random, perhaps. But why would it give you tools for something you don't have? To me, that seems really strange. But here's the Black Puker. He's got I thought that was a sweeping brush, but it wasn't. I don't know what that was that I just stuck in him. He's probably quite miffed. It could be maybe Space Dysons. I don't know. He's got a sharp end, though, so that's okay. And we got really lucky then because the Puker gave us the tools to kill the Stalker, which is perfect. It's exactly what we want from this encounter. Look at this mechanic, though. What a cool mechanic. An enemy that shoots a projectile at you and you use it to kill everything else. I love that. I really do. Oh, and when he starts moving towards you, if you shoot him, it prioritises him to start spitting again, it seems. So you do not want to allow the Puker to run towards you, because he'll do a puke you cannot stop. This is me trying to grab his body, and I grab every single other limb. Take his elbow off, his kneecap off, his earlobes off, his penis off, and then there is his body finally. In a moment such as that, it really makes you wonder how it works, doesn't it? You'd think that they would prioritise the body or the blades than anything else. You should have to aim to the limbs to pick the limbs off, I think. You shouldn't just get them when you're trying to grab the whole thing. Seems really bizarre, doesn't it? Especially considering that the limbs don't really do too much. The body doesn't really do too much either, but at a push it can do some things. Like a room such as this, a body would be really handy because it stops the stalkers. And bodies also knock over the regenerator, well, the Uber Necromorph, if you know that fella. Which I think is really strange. Because he's this big intimidating force that regenerates and can't seemingly be killed. But if you chuck a body at him, he topples over. Maybe he's got weak ankles. Who knows? But I can't tell if there's anybody left. But the moment that you let your guard down, you get rushed by a stalker you didn't see. And I'd like to save my stasis if I can. But my vision here is that if I move past these stairs on the left, it's going to trip something. So I'm tentatively kind of circling around to see if I can trip it and move backwards. And here you can see I'm not too confident, nothing's happened. Go to the stairs. Does it happen now? Something dropped just then. There it was. Hear the music? And look, see the stalker behind me? I knew it was going to happen, I just didn't know the way. And then I miss with my projectile, and I have to stasis him. And that's a puker. So did you hear that just then? Perfect audio telegraph. He made a very distinct noise. I knew exactly what it meant, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. That's why I love Dead Space 2. Well, there goes the leg of the puker. He's still alive. And there goes the second limb into him. He's still alive. And for some reason, I'm not using his puke. That was terrible, Chris. You've learnt this lesson. Stop doing that. Could have done with those shots, but I guess I just wanted to get the room over and done with. This is the final encounter of this section. And then on the next one, we're going to be entering the mining facility and the gov building and all that stuff. And there's a fight on, I don't know what chapter it is, but you know the one I'm talking about, where you pull the battery out and it's just a room full of 5 million dudes that don't seem to have any kind of set spawn paths. Oh, that's another one of those dickish boxes as well. I suppose this does kind of open your eyes to a strategy that I shouldn't be doing, which is the idea of breaking telekinesis boxes close to me. I should do it at a distance and then just grab the items with telekinesis, but for some reason I have a tendency of smashing things at my feet so I can pick them up with the A button. And I don't know where that programming came from, but it's definitely strong to resist it. But I remember the chapter coming up was where my final save in hardcore was, because I'd been so paranoid with my saves because I don't like permadeath, that I ended up saving super early, and it did not help. But luckily enough, I was comfortable with the game to an extent, and I didn't get any unfortunate events that I didn't mess up. I didn't like spike myself with the needle machine. I didn't accidentally get sucked out of a window. So it didn't make too much of a difference. But to say that I was nervous, here's how nervous I was, right, guys? You know when I killed the final boss? I paused the game before I flew to Ellie, and I watched a video of myself flying to Ellie to see where the debris came from, because I was so paranoid I was going to get hit by the debris and die. And that is a true story, that, guys. But thank you very much for watching, and you take care now.